Greetings all, this is Harry Nick.
This is Justin.
Welcome to the Junkyard.
Yes.
A new show here on the channel where we talk about terrible ships. Just terrible ships that you should never fly. No, that's a bit hyperbole.
And how to make them better.
Yes, indeed. So, in the game of X-Wing, we have what's called a meta. A meta basically dictates what is doing well and doing bad right now, and there's a number of factors as to why that is. But ultimately, in the wide world of game design, not everything flies, no pun intended. Sometimes things just don't work, playtesting doesn't quite expose certain flaws or anything with ships. And indeed, in the world of X-Wing, there are so many game elements, so many ships and upgrades, that sometimes some of them are going to be bad. So, we're going to talk about them, discuss why they're bad, and perhaps suggest how they could be better. Start off with the TIE Aggressor.
Yes, so this is one of my beloved factions.
Indeed, we're over on the Empire faction for the first time. And yes, this ship is interesting. We had a chat to the patrons on Discord, say, hey, I want to make a new video series about ships that don't see much play. We already talk a heap about the ships that do see play. What should we talk about? TIE Aggressor, basically every other comment.
Yeah.
And it's the first thing that came to my mind as well, to be honest. And I think one of the things about the TIE Aggressor which really helps it stand out is you can compare it to something else already in the game which is doing it's not in every other list, but it's doing quite well.
Yeah.
And this is true of a lot of ships, like you've got your different X-Wings, your different Millennium Falcons, whatever. The TIE Aggressor and the Y-Wing are very much linked.
Well, this was actually meant to be one of the ships that was comparable to the Y-Wing in one of the games.
Yes, Star Wars Galaxies, it was introduced into the game as just like a way of balancing out factions, that kind of stuff. In fact, the Alpha Class Star Wing was very much a similar thing. They needed a heavy missile carrier that sort of was comparable to the Y-Wing in a different Star Wars game.
Yeah.
Y-Wing causes a lot of issues for balance, apparently, in computer games. But yeah, the TIE Aggressor, a turreted carry ship, noted in the Wikipedia article, which I will link down below, flies very similarly to the Y-Wing.
Actually, on
black
that,
shields, so it's pretty much what it is in the game, actually, yeah.
On that, it also says it's a bomber.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
I think it's a bomber class, and I think that's a general term given to things that can fire missiles and torpedoes. I'm not disagreeing with you. But the fact of the matter is, it was put into a Star Wars game, and that's our only real strong point of reference, which actually means that it's very ill-defined, which from a gameplay point of view is helpful because it can be altered in its original design. Obviously, all of the pilots, I know Star Wars is fictional, but they're very fictional in their design. Like, they can literally create any character to go into it because it doesn't see any screen time. When you make like an X-Wing, well, of course you're going to put X-Wing pilots that we actually saw flying X-Wings. TIE Aggressors don't have that issue. So we'll talk about potential things we can add onto it in a minute. But first of all, let's talk about what makes this ship not tick, I guess I can say.
So the lowest point ship for the TIE Aggressor is the Sonar Specialist at 30 points. It's Initiative 2.
Which, Initiative 2, Initiative 1, whatever. It's low initiative.
Yeah. Next is the Onyx Squadron Scout at Initiative 3.
Also gets you a talent, for however relevant that is.
At 32 points, so 2 points more.
The next one, Double Edge. Actually 1 point more, but only Initiative 2. So there's a pretty hefty premium on this pilot ability. I'm not entirely sure why. I mean, this is interesting because a lot of people who watch this channel were very excited about Double Edge in first edition. I got a lot of lists submitted for the list review we do here on the channel with Double Edge. I was never really convinced by him in first edition.
Yeah.
And he's worse in second edition. Arguably strictly worse.
I bought one. I must admit, I bought one of these ships just to say that I bought one of those ships.
It looks really cool. Like, it's a very cool model. The main issue with Double Edge, after you perform a turret or missile attack that misses, you may perform a bonus attack using a different weapon. Exactly the same as he was in first edition. It didn't specify turret or missile, so you were able to use it off a regular attack. But it's just as relevant. The biggest issue here is in first edition we had things like TLT. We had ways to fire out of arc in any direction we want with a huge zone, and we just don't have that anymore. It makes this even harder to trigger. And I ultimately come back to the same issue with Double Edge is, why do you want to miss an attack?
Yeah.
You get a second attack, that's great, but I don't see why you wouldn't.
A shot, basically.
Well, you're not wasted a shot. You get another shot. That's great, but why don't you just hit with that first attack? What are you gaining from another shot?
I suppose they're wasting resources.
Yeah, I mean, you can double tap the same thing. The fact that it's a different weapon, that really hurts. The thing is, you can get a dorsal turret on Double Edge, fire the dorsal turret, then fire a regular weapon. That's just worse than having a veteran turret gunner. Which just gives you that second attack no matter what. Yeah, it's kind of awkward.
It's all just fell into place for me. Yeah, that's...
Pilot abilities in general should be better than upgrade abilities. That's a general rule with design in X-Wing.
Yeah.
Double Edge, I've just never really understood. Look, if one of you guys in the comment section actually uses Double Edge and you have a sort of build out that makes use of this ability, I'm curious, but I'm also baffled. Let's move on to Lieutenant Kestal, Initiative 4, talent again. While you perform an attack after the defender rolls dice, you may spend one focus token to cancel all of the defender's blank and focus results. Now, this was a very interesting ability in first edition. Not that it saw a lot of play, but the ability to cancel out a lot of stuff, especially in a world where you had a lot of ways to convert blank results. Auto thrusters, all the shenanigans with Sunterfell, Palp, all that kind of thing. I'm curious about this with the introduction of gas clouds into the game.
I suppose also against Jedi it's going to be pretty good because they're...
Yes, that's a good point. So after the defender's defense dice are rolled, which means you get in before they can use force tokens. It wouldn't have much value otherwise.
Yeah.
But yes, you always modify your opponent's dice first. So it's interesting in a world with Jedis. I look at things like the gas cloud, and I think this has the same problem as blackout on the TIE Silencer.
Yeah.
You are a blackout specialist. You know that if that positioning doesn't work, it feels bad.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good.
You then just get hit and you lose your ship and you feel sad.
Not great. And Lieutenant Kestal is a 6-point investment over the Sinai Specialist, the cheapest version of the ship. So something that is that inconsistent, I think is too problematic. Now, we can compare the TIE Aggressor to the Y-Wing, as I was talking about before. The cheapest platform on the Y-Wing is 31 points, and that's either on the Rebellion or Scum faction, a single point more than the TIE Aggressor. The highest points value, in fact, let's actually not look at the highest points value because it's a bit hard to sort of compare them. Dutch Vander on the Rebellion is also Initiative 4. Dutch is 39 points, which is a 3-point increase. If we go over to the Scum faction, and it's not a great comparison with the Scum faction because they also have illicits, so it actually makes them sort of a notch more powerful as well. Dreo Ranthal, Initiative 4, is 42 points. So a decent jump up there, but a nice sort of swag of upgrades. In fact, indeed, I think the upgrades are one of the key things that make the Y-Wing a bit more of a tantalising option. Let's talk about these differences here for a start, yeah.
So the upgrades on the Y-Wing are a turret, a torpedo, a astromech, a modification, a device, and a gunner.
Yes, the TIE Aggressor also has the turret, the gunner, and the modification. But instead of torpedo, astromech, and device, it has 2 missiles. Now, I don't mind the 2 missiles. I think it's an interesting area to explore.
It means that it's got access to barrage rockets, which is pretty good.
It's pretty good, but there is a key problem with that. The point space of the TIE Aggressor is the same as the TIE Bomber. The cheapest platform on both are 30 points. And a TIE Bomber has a better dial.
Not only that, it's also got more hull.
It has 6 hull and no shields as opposed to 4 and 1 shield. And look, I honestly think that those are pretty comparable. I think sort of trading off 2 hull for a shield that's pretty on par. But I probably just want more hull. I probably just want more health overall. And if you want to go in on the barrage rocket strategy, well, you probably just want to use the thing that's more maneuverable. It tends to make a lot more sense. If you want to go in on the dorsal turret veteran turret gunner or like an ion cannon turret veteran turret gunner combo, There's a problem here with the points value. If you were to stick those upgrades on the cheapest platform on the Y-Wing or the cheapest platform on the TIE Aggressor, you would be just shy of 40 points. In fact, on the Y-Wing, we're looking at 39 points, and on the TIE Aggressor, we're looking at 38 points.
Which is realistically no points difference.
And there's a bit of a fundamental problem with this. In the game of X-Wing, you can field a squad of 200 points. At the end of the day, when you're looking at the points of different ships, they have to be significantly different to be able to fit more or less of the same ship. They've got to hit certain squad point values to be relevant when it comes to list building. The difference between 38 and 39 points is nothing. You can field 5 of them, or you can field 5 of them, if that's what you want to do. And what it means on these different factions is pretty much nothing.
Except for the fact that a Y-Wing has more hull and more shield.
More hull, more health overall, and I would argue a better amount of upgrades. Now, the TIE Aggressor dial is almost strictly better than the Y-Wing dial. I would say it's most of the time better. Yes, I know you can't really compare 2 banks to 1 banks, but let's face it, it's basically strictly better.
Yeah, except for one thing.
What's that?
The Y-Wing has a astromech, Nick.
It has an astromech, and that is a huge problem. Now, the good thing is, the thing going for the TIE Aggressor here is you can't put dorsal turret, veteran turret gunner, and an R4 astromech on the Y-Wing and fit it under that sweet spot 40-point mark. So, yeah, that's a factor. But you have to appreciate the fact that you probably just want more health.
Yeah.
And if you do have points to spare, the redundancy in the Y-Wing is it can take the R4 astromech. And at the point that you take an R4 astromech, the Y-Wing dial, again, not strictly better than the TIE Aggressor, but basically better. You would have 3 forward and banks all blue, and the 3 hard being white.
Which feels really good.
And look, the 4 straights red, I don't think it really matters. You barely ever use it.
No.
And this is the fundamental thing, like, you can make incremental difference in points values and the quality of a ship, but when they're so comparable like this, these little incremental changes don't change the fact that they still have to slot into 200 points. And when it's 1 point difference and they still are just below 40 points, it actually doesn't make a difference. And that's the problem. Just having things, well, this is a little bit better, so it'll be a little bit more in the points. It actually doesn't make a difference. It still fits in exactly the same spot.
Yeah.
And that's a problem when it comes to list building. And it's a good argument for FFG to look at different formats that use different points values. It can actually make different ships more relevant, even though they're only at slightly different points values. Also, it should be pointed out that the Y-Wing did come down in points in the last points change. Not the Scum one, the Rebel one. Which means that the points difference have become much closer. And considering the Y-Wings actually seeing play, TIE Aggressor not seeing play, it really hurt the TIE Aggressor more than anything else. Also, the cost of dorsal turret and veteran turret gunner came down as well. Now, that's actually a really good thing for the TIE Aggressor.
Definitely.
And maybe that's the reason FFG didn't touch their points. They were too worried about that. I can understand that. Look, It couldn't field dorsal turret, veteran turret gunner for 38 points. It would have been over 40 points before. So I can see why FFG might have been, let's just back off a bit here, guys.
Yeah.
You know, the Y-Wing's good. That's enough. And I can understand that Y-Wing is an iconic ship. Battle of Yavin. I get that. But ultimately, in the world of X-Wing, we do want everything to be as close as meta-playable as possible. That is always the dream. It's not easy. Now, let's face it, it's never going to truly happen. But let's approach equilibrium at all points.
So how do you think we could do this, Nick?
How do you think we could fix this? It's a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah.
We're playing Armchair CEO here. I will say categorically, we don't know what we're doing. We're not playtesting here. I just want to look at this and think to myself, well, what can we do? The first thing that springs to mind, and this is something that FFG said they were looking at doing in second edition, but haven't done with any ships yet, and that's adding pilots on the re-release.
Yeah.
When the TIE Aggressor does actually get released in second edition, they can add more pilots. And I know everyone always freaks out when I say that. That would mean that us existing players would get those pilots in a separate pack. We would not have to rebuy the TIE Aggressor. Just want to make that very clear.
Yeah.
Whenever I bring that up, there's always comments going, oh, no, we don't have to rebuy stuff. No, we don't have to rebuy stuff. It's okay. It's all right. And that would be good. because frankly, these named pilots are not relevant. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. They're just not.
No, and the fact that there's only 2 of them, it doesn't help.
I look at Horton Salm on the Y-Wing. I look at Cavill on the Y-Wing. Even Drea Renthal, really spicy Y-Wing pilot. There is nothing at the TIE Aggressor that I can point at and go, yeah, this is cool. This is really using the frame. It feels really Imperial.
No.
Yeah, it feels a bit awkward. And I think that's a key thing that FFG should look at. Something that uses the TIE Aggressor. Something that, would be amazing on a Y-Wing. But doesn't matter. It's not on a Y-Wing. It's on a TIE Aggressor. And it feels Imperial. It's ruthlessly efficient. That's the kind of thing I want to see. In terms of upgrades, this is a difficult thing to look at because...
Yeah, because if you put an upgrade onto this, technically anything else could take it.
If it could go on something else. That's the real clincher here. If you give it a turret, which makes it relevant, well, that also helps Y-Wings.
Yeah.
If you give it a missile, another double missile, that also is dangerous. And I think ultimately we have to look at the unique things that the TIE Aggressor does, or the unique place it sits in, and ask ourselves, well, what if we gave it something like that? What if there was, for example, a turret or a gunner that was unique to the Empire? Like a gunner that specifically worked with turrets unique to the Empire.
Ooh, that's an interesting way of going about it.
Exactly right. And there would be no other ship that could use it. I mean, if FFG are looking at making another Empire ship with turrets, which is not likely, that would be a very elegant solution. Obviously, if we look at things like Empire-specific missiles, well, watch out for the Punishers, watch out for the TIE bombers as well.
Yeah.
But this TIE platform that can take a turret, it's a small ship on the Empire with a turret that is so unique, it's not likely to be duplicated. That is the kind of space FFG can look at.
Yeah.
And also, we were talking before how both the pilots and the ship itself are so ill-defined. It does give FFG a lot of breathing room to play around with this ship. We were talking before about configurations. Now, I don't like just slapping on a configuration card to fix a ship.
Yeah.
I think that's very first edition territory.
I agree with you on that.
I think if that were to happen, it would have to be like different versions of the ship, like the Alpha Class Star Wing.
Yeah.
How it has a version that uses... What's it? A version that uses cannons and a version that uses...
more
torpedoes and missiles.
Yeah.
Like a version of this that used turrets, or a version of this that uses like double missile barrage rockets, and plays around with those a little bit.
That could be interesting.
And the great thing is, I mean, the problem with fixes in first edition was it just made things strictly more powerful. In second edition, we can up the points if anything like that happens. So it actually is an environment where you can do those kind of things. I'm just trepidatious about things you slap onto a ship to make it better.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we already have baked-in abilities. Just a configuration that just 0 points does something to a ship, I don't think is good design. I think it's bloated, it makes the game cumbersome, and it's a very dangerous thing for FFG to do.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing with any ship to fix it is to look at its unique place in the game and work out what it needs in terms of upgrades and also pilots. FFG haven't done it yet, but I think this is clearly a candidate that needs it.
Yeah, like we were talking with the dorsal turrets, maybe a disruptor turret.
Yes, disruptors. This is something we were talking about in Star Wars lore. They were talking about it in Rebels, was it?
I think so, with
Agent Callus
against the Mandalorians
and the Lasats. Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, but also disruptors were in different parts of Star Wars. If you ever played the old Jedi Knight games where you could melt people with a sniper rifle.
Yeah, they went under the shields, which was always interesting.
Which is a clear design direction for something like X-Wing. So there could be like a disruptor cannon, disruptor turret for the Empire. Now, that may great against the law and not work. It's just an idea that we're throwing out there. We're not saying that should absolutely happen. But I think there are clear ways that FFG can look at these kind of things. Just be careful of upgrades that also go on other ships and make sure that we're not sort of raising everything up. So all of a sudden this thing over here, which was already amazing, just goes up and up and up in power level. The TIE Bomber is the clear candidate. only because it has the same weaponry, but it also sits at exactly the same points.
Yeah.
So I think that's why I'm looking mainly at gunners and turrets and stuff that works specifically with that space.
If it was a gunner, though, it would have to be a
turret specific, or an aggressive specific gunner, like Special Forces gunner on the TIE SF, that kind of thing. And what do you guys think? Do you think there's any other way to fix this ship? Do you think it's just doomed to fail, or do you think FFG should just dive bomb the points until they make it work? I think that's very dangerous. I think just making it so cheap that you can just field 6 with dorsals and veteran turret gunner, I think is too dangerous.
Yeah,
I think I don't
think that would be fun either.
I think there has to be ways to make it more unique and sort of set it apart from the Y-Wing. That is my key thoughts on this.
Yeah.
Also in the comment section, guys, what should we have a look at next in the Junkyard? What ship do you think is just absolutely terrible? The great thing is, in the world of points changes, things are becoming more and more relevant. A lot of ships that were bad in the first era of 2nd edition are starting to see a bit more play, but there are still things which are just crappy. And you know what? I don't mind talking about crappy things. I think it's an interesting subject because game design, this is ultimately what happens.
Yeah.
Righto, in the meantime, do not forget to like and subscribe. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Reddit. Please consider supporting the Patreon. And you guys on the Patreon Discord, thank you for your input on this one. Let's have a chat about what we're going to do in the next episode.
Thank you very much, guys. I'll see you later.
Catch you guys later.